Hi, everybody, and welcome to our show today. And the reason that I picked resentment for today's topic is because a lot of what we're seeing globally right now has to do with resentments being played out over continents, over countries, over a lot of what we're seeing with Israel, Palestine, and a lot
Quite
of
tragically.
tragically playing out. And the problem with resentment isn't that it's not justified because,
Correct.
people are very deeply wronged. People are actually very deeply wronged in both sides of this conflict. But the problem is that resentment and revenge only breeds more of that. And so we're going to tackle resentment on sort of a bigger global stage and then also resentment at a personal level because the only real person that resentment hurts is you. But we don't talk about it that way, right? We use resentment almost as a shield to say, well,
Yeah.
this person hurt me. My mom was this way growing up. My dad was this way growing up. My best friend, did this to me when we were young. This person did this to me. And it's not that it's not justified. The problem is that it hurts you and stops you from living the life that you probably really actually want to live, one where you feel at peace and free and self-expressed and able to have the things that you want in life. So we're going to talk about it from a personal level and then also more from a global level.
And one of the important things here is these patterns sneak up from our unconscious mind
Yeah.
and harm us today.
Yeah.
So, this is really an important topic to get free from the past, get free from any number of bad situations, and convert them to that was a cause and effect. I learned something really important.
Yeah.
And one of the conclusions is that kind of thing doesn't happen to me anymore. Now, how
Yeah.
did that happen? Well, we're going to talk about personal responsibility too.
Absolutely. So let's actually start with that because I want to start this show saying that there really are reasons to be resentful. Okay? Like there are horrible people who do horrible things. And what I think is maybe worse is there are people who think they're doing the right thing doing horrible things.
I mean, we're almost overwhelmed with the amount of bad things people are doing today.
The road to hell is paved with good intentions, right? The amount of people and this was prevalent. We're not on Rumble right now, we're on YouTube. But the amount of people that over the last several years thought that they were doing the right thing by bullying other people into believing the narrative that they particularly believed, right? By if you guys are new here, which you're probably not, our belief in the mainstream narrative is very low. But bullying other people into the mainstream narrative, right? Like that's the road to hell is paved with good intentions.
Boy, this topic is so big. Want to jump to personal responsibility?
So I wanted to start with the fact that there are really bad people who really do hurt you because that's the first part of this. The first part of this is that you have to make sure whatever the thing is that's hurting you stops. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. So, are there bad people in the world that have no regard for how your rights and dignity, have no regard whatsoever for what you think or feel?
Right.
Uh, in my career, I've talked to any number of real sociopaths, and I get into rapport really easily with people. And one of those, I got into a real conversation with one of these people, and what he said to me is, "I see you wearing my watch.
Yeah.
I see you have my whatever."
Yeah.
He had no concept that I was even here, that I was a human being, that any rights or anything else. It was all about them, all about that person. And there are a lot of them around. I mean, a lot of them around.
Yeah.
And they very quickly let you know they don't care what you think or feel. They have no respect for your property. They have no respect for anything. It's all about them.
And you can see that sort of play out in policy right now. You can see that play out in government. To me, that seems in a certain way almost like what lobbying and corporate interests overall
Yes.
are,
Yes.
is, the fundamental disregard for the lives of other people. So if you look at, for example, the ingredients in the same foods that go to the EU, for example, that are in Europe versus the same foods here, they're made of different things.
Yes.
And the reason is because the EU doesn't allow a whole bunch of the junk that the United States allows. Well, why is that? Right? Why is that? It's because the government over there said, hey, these things are harmful. We don't want them in our food. Whereas the politicians here in the US, there's not even any political will to get that changed. It's not even really a conversation about getting these sort of harmful parts of food out, right? Getting a lot of the food dyes and a lot of the bad junk out. So that's
there are political consequences for the people in our legislature
Mhm.
because they're funded by these big corporations.
Right.
We know it, and we know that they have a challenging time representing we the people
Right.
because we the people don't give them enough money to buy their way back
Right.
into office.
That's the
We
point.
know it.
That's the point, is we the people don't give them enough money to buy their way back in, and
Right.
large corporations do. So it's a well-known fact. So that brings us back to resentment, though, because it's very easy to look at your external circumstances and say, well, I resent the politicians for doing this. I resent my partner for doing this. I resent my parents for doing this. Okay. So I'll use food as an example because it's one that's like prolific. It's like everywhere.
Yeah.
Okay. The reality is that you have a choice. And I think it's the biggest part of resentment is when you resent something, you feel like you don't have a choice, but you do. So you have the choice to look at the ingredients on the foods that you buy. And you can say, you know what, food dyes really are not for me. So you look at the food dyes in things and you say, that's not what I want to buy. What I would rather buy is this thing that is organic, or that doesn't have any extra additives, where I can recognize all of the things that are in this food.
You mean personal responsibility?
Yeah.
You mean own your own life?
Well,
whoa.
In that, personal responsibility means that you're not victimized by the thing that's happening anymore. You're not victimized by the bad food that exists out there. You're not allowing yourself to continue participating in that cycle. Now, granted, there are times when that's harder than others. When you're a kid, there's nothing you can do. You survive the best way that you can being a kid.
Right.
If you are
That's
in
true.
if you are in a war zone, you get out or you survive the best that you can. So there are extreme situations where that isn't the case. You're not in charge. But if you're listening to this right now, you're probably not in that category. You're in the category of all the rest of us who have the opportunity to be victimized on a regular basis, but who are choosing something else. And even if that's, you don't talk to your family member anymore that caused the trauma, whatever that is, you have the option to do something else for the most part.
Right. One of the things about personal responsibility is you're putting cause and effect together.
Yeah.
This person did this kind of behavior to me and I didn't like it.
Right.
They embarrassed me and said cruel things at a family meeting,
Mhm.
and have done it a couple of times. And they're going to continue to do it, and you know it.
Yeah.
Confronting them isn't going to help, but you can stay away from them. You
Yeah.
can give them absolutely no energy. You don't have to engage them, and that's across the board.
Right.
Any situation that you really don't like, you can get away from it.
Right.
Now, are you going to fix the problem? There is no fix.
Yeah, you might not. You might be able to fix the problem, sure.
Well, let's say it's a conflict with your husband or wife.
Yes.
That's a very different situation.
Right.
But by and large, the people they're in conflict with, well, let me not go that far. Sometimes the real conflict between husband and wife.
Yeah.
And at that point, they probably need some help with that. But even then,
Yeah.
can you let that circumstance ruin your life, or you own up to it and say, okay, I need to do something different here.
Right.
I need to extricate.
It's actually interesting you're talking about husband and wife situation. So I have a close friend. He used to be a mentor, but he's a close friend now, and he and his wife had been married, I think, like 20 years or something. And they had a fundamental disagreement during the COVID years. They had a fundamental disagreement about how they were going to handle that. And one was on each extreme of the spectrum.
Wow.
And they survived. They as a couple, they survived and thrived because they agreed that they were going to let the other have their own position on it, and that they were just going to accept it and love the other person no matter what, and not talk about it. And they survived and thrived. And I thought that that was a very interesting way to handle it, because typically we think that the other person needs to believe the same thing that we do.
Not true.
Not true. And they were a phenomenal example of that, of you can actually just choose, you can choose to love the other person for having a very different point of view than you do, without trying to change that. And not always, I mean, if it's something really harmful, obviously don't do that. But, mostly we have everyday normal situations that we're talking about.
And no matter who you know, you're going to have some differences of opinion with them. And you have to
Right.
accept it. It's the benefit that you get from the overall relationship.
Right.
And you just choose to ignore the other by agreement.
Right.
So you don't bring it up anymore.
Well, so let's dive into resentment for a second. What is it? What does it take? So first of all, what is resentment? So let's talk about that for a second.
Oh, go ahead and start that one, because
Okay.
I've got it's too complex for me to, I can't quite dig into it yet.
All right. So resentment is that feeling of you have been harmed, you have been wronged in some way. You have an internal reaction. It's somewhere in your body. You have an internal reaction that you've been hit, right? You've been hit.
You've been
hurt,
violated.
you've been violated
Okay.
in some way.
And you're hurt and angry about it.
You're hurt and angry about it.
And they're to blame.
Fundamentally, the first thing you really want is for it to stop. Right. And I think ultimately that's where resentment comes from, is it's your system saying this must stop. It is harming me in some way.
Right.
Okay. So it's important to pay attention to resentment. I'm not just saying like, frou, let it go. Oh my God, it's not a big deal. No, there's some real information that it's trying to give you.
Oh, I like this path. Yes.
Okay. And so you've been hurt, you've been violated in some way, and you're getting the indication that that's happening and that you need it to stop.
I want more of it or less of it.
More of it or less of it. The problem is that typically it either stops or it doesn't, and you keep going and you hold on to the resentment. But either way, you're holding on to the resentment for life. Now, there is a benefit to that. The benefit is that you likely have an indicator that says, I don't want any more of this anywhere in my life. So anytime something even kind of pokes you, so it's like if you have a bee sting, right? And somebody touches your bee sting, you erupt. You get really upset. It hurts a lot. But the person who touched it isn't the person who hurt you. The bee is what hurt you, and the sting is what hurts.
Right.
It's just somebody gently touches it or grazes it, and all of a sudden it's this huge painful reaction. But it didn't come from the person grazing it or touching it, okay? But that's an indication of like, hey, don't touch this spot because I've been hurt here. So there's a lot of benefit to that, to really paying attention to where you feel resentment and why, because you have been violated.
So a person hurts you in a particular way.
Right.
Doesn't matter what it is, they violated you.
Right.
And when you meet new people, you look for the signs that are similar to the person who hurt you.
Yeah.
You say, well, they just exhibited this kind of behavior. I'm out of here.
The problem is the human mind doesn't always work in such a perfect way. And very often we find ourselves in repeating trauma loops. So repeating or bringing back into your life the exact same circumstance that caused it to begin with. And that's the biggest problem with holding on to resentment like this. And I'm going to put it this way. So when you have something like resentment, it is probably whatever it is you resent is probably something you focus on. Okay. And there's a phenomena. The I heard this example the other day, and I thought this was very interesting. How many red cars did you see on your way here today, on the way to studio today?
0.
Right? What if I had paid you $50 for every red car you saw on the way over here? How many red cars would you have seen?
Everyone that was there.
Every single one, right? You probably would have seen 10, 20, 30, however many there were. The point is, now it's in the front of your mind, so it's what you see. The
Right.
problem with resentment is that when it's what you see, because it's in your mind, because your mind is saying, don't bring this in. We don't want this. You got hurt and violated. You can't get hurt and violated again. So we're not going to do this. So what is it doing? You are looking for that situation. So what are you going to see? It's like the red cars. You're going to see it everywhere. And so unfortunately, we end up
Inviting it into your life.
inviting it into your life. And you can tell you've really healed a resentment because you don't see it anymore. It doesn't pop up in your life anymore. And you can tell you haven't because it keeps playing itself out in trauma loops.
That's actually common.
It's more common than not, and it's one of the reasons to release resentment. Because if you're staring at the thing that hurt you over and over and over again, and it's coming back into your life, whether it's a family member, let's say, a parent made fun of you for your career choice, for example, right? Let's say that happened, and so every freaking holiday, there it is, and that person is doing it again. Okay. So whether it's something like that, or whether it's something that happened, your first boyfriend or girlfriend cheated on you and broke up with you. Whatever that is, whether it's something that only happened once or whether it's something that's re-happening again, the moment that you let go of that, you stop seeing it. So let's say in the cheating example, people who have been cheated on typically get cheated on again and again and again, which is horrible. It's so degrading. It's bad for your self-esteem. It's horrible in every way, right? But why do they keep finding the people who do that?
Well, the real reason is because they're going for what's familiar.
Yeah.
And boy, is this an important concept to grasp. Yeah. And this is part of really getting control of your life. To understand that you are programmed to go for the familiar.
Yeah.
Now, what does that really mean? So let's say that somewhere in this person's history, the one that's been cheated on, their father or mother cheated on their mate.
Yeah.
Now, whether you knew it consciously or not, you did know it.
Yep.
Chances are you knew it consciously, because those things are pretty apparent anymore. Mm-hmm. And whatever the circumstance, whatever the patterns were of the cheater, that's what's familiar to you.
Yeah.
And especially if it's a girl with a father or son with them, whatever. Yeah. And so you're driven to go with what you already know unconsciously. And you say, well, that's terrible. It's really not terrible if your life is really simple, like in a simple society.
Right.
But we don't live in a simple society at all. We live in a almost hopelessly complex society.
So complex that people are not thriving in it.
As a rule, they're not thriving in it.
Yep.
Which is its own story, but it happens to be the case. And so you start looking at, how do I get out of this?
Yeah.
Well, the first thing is you need to be aware of this concept of I'm driven to go for the familiar. Mm-hmm. Now, that's not good or it's not bad. It's just what's so.
Right.
So now what do we do about it? Well, if you pick cheaters more than once, you say, okay, there's something here. If I'm going to own my own life, if I'm going to be personally responsible, I need to take this on as to how am I being driven to do this?
Yeah.
Now, chances are you're going to be able to do that totally on your own. No.
No.
But if you have really intelligent friends who do not give you advice, but actually talk to you about things, you can talk it over with them. They might really be a resource to help you figure out what's going on.
Yeah.
Armed with this information and the fact that you are personally responsible for your life,
yeah,
you can say, okay, I want to go for this cheater again, but I know better.
Yeah.
If you can't find if you can't find friends that don't just load you up with lousy advice, you need to find a good counselor.
Yeah,
You
I
need to
agree with
talk.
that.
You
I
need
agree
to
with
find
that.
somebody who will listen to you without telling you what to do.
Yeah.
The whole point is for you to live your life on your terms and be personally responsible.
Yeah.
But it falls on you to do something about it. No one's going to do it for you, no
You
matter
know,
what you think.
the one thing that I think that I would encourage people to do is actually some time with your own mind, with your own self, because I think that's something that's sorely lacking. And even this actually bothers me. So, the and this is actually fairly well known that I think it was in the 70s where the CIA infiltrated's like a weird word for that, but became involved in the spiritual movement.
Oh, did they?
Yeah.
I'm not. I guess I'm really not really
Wow, what a
surprised.
surprise. I'm sure no one thinks that's a surprise really, but and so you get things like meditation and people try it for a little while and they say, "Well, this didn't really work for me. I can't silence my mind." In the ancient forms of meditation, you're not supposed to silence your mind. You either focus on something else, right? Like a mantra, and even other cultures know this, or you really sit with yourself and you actually pay attention to what comes up from your mind. Now, I found that the biggest issue with the people I work with, and actually every single person that I encounter, is that they can't tell the difference between their own intuition and the head voices in their head. Mostly people's head voices are very unkind. Mostly they are cruel and awful and say everything to you that you secretly think about yourself and you think that nobody else knows and your mind is saying it back to you, right? So most people have very cruel head voices and they think it's them, right? They think it's them, it's their own voices saying this.
And they're believable.
And they're believable because it's the things you secretly believe about yourself anyway, right?
And they have the most compelling language that's believable to
You
the
specifically.
executive
Yes.
processor. Yeah.
You specifically. So the one voice that people are not really acquainted with is what is the voice of your intuition. That we all have it, that one clear voice that comes from I don't know where, God, the universe, your highest self, whatever you want to call it. But it's the voice that always actually gives you the answer that is right for you, the answer that you need. And it comes from you, not from the outside world, not from your mean head voices, but it comes from you. That really clear voice that really has the answer. Okay. Whatever you want to call that, it's the voice of your intuition. Most people don't know how to discern that voice, right?
They might not even know it exists among all the voices.
Right. And because I've had people tell me, like the voice of my heart always just wants to be kind to everybody regardless. And although that's the right choice, right? That kindness and deep compassion is the right choice. Sometimes that's not the answer you need. Sometimes you need a different answer than that, right?
Absolutely right.
And so you really have to take a step back and figure out what is the voice of your intuition. So I'm going to give this as an option because you and I use different modalities to help people really find that. But an option is automatic writing or journal writing.
Well, we
And
both do that.
we do. And I had a friend say, well, I hate journal writing. Okay, I don't just mean journal writing because people will write for a couple minutes and they'll write whatever. I mean for an extended period of time, like set your timer for 15 or 20 minutes and keep writing. So like write the question, whatever the question is you have, like how can I heal from this? Because at the very beginning, it'll be all of those head voices. It'll be you, it'll be all those head voices. But as those run out, something else will kick in if you keep going. And that's where you'll get a lot of really good answers. And some people even say, I don't remember writing that. And they'll go back and reread it and say, oh, that's what I really needed to know. That's what I really needed to hear. So you have to do it for enough time that it gets past all the junk in your head gets to say all it needs to say, and then you get to the real good stuff.
When I've been working with people, I can't tell you how many times I did this.
Yeah.
They'd come to a place where they'd say, okay, this is what happened. I say,
Yeah.
okay, what else happened?
Right.
What else? What else?
Right.
What else? And finally, they get to a place where they tell what really happened, how they
Right.
really are reacting to it, and how it's hurt their life.
Yep.
Now we got someplace to go.
Right.
But I had to dig deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper. But what else have you got? What else have you got? So one voice shuts up because it said everything.
Yeah.
The next one kicks in. Then we find out that this is an issue they had when they were 6.
Yeah.
You're going, now let's resolve that one.
Exactly.
And then watch it ripple its way up all the way to your current age.
Right.
There's some very cool techniques for doing this.
Yeah, there are.
And the point is gaining control of it.
Yeah.
So the resentments aren't where you live. It's going after what you want.
Right.
That's everything.
I will say this about choosing to not let resentments or choosing to not let your external circumstance dictate your life, because it is by far what the media tells you to do. It is by far what society tells you to do, is to let yourself be. Here are all the reasons why you are a victim. Here are all the reasons why you cannot thrive in this world. This world is hard to thrive in. I mean, let's be real clear about that. This is not an easy world to thrive in.
Right.
There are a lot of reasons that none of us could use, that all of us could use to not thrive. Okay. The problem with that is that you then have to live the life that provides for you. But here's the deal about it, about not healing resentment, is that very often there is a benefit to you to not healing that. There is a benefit like, well, if I don't heal my resentment with my, I don't know, mother about what she wanted me to do, and this is not from my real life. My mom is extremely supportive and wonderful. But if I have this resentment that my parents wanted me to be this in life, and I never lived up to that, then you never have to go out and see if you'd actually be good at it and fail at it or succeed at it. But you never have to take that risk yourself if you're blaming somebody else. Right? So there's a way in which our resentments actually allow us to not go and be what we could be. And it's important. People actually do this. Have you ever met anybody, and I know you have, and I have too, who all they talked about was their sickness, right?
Oh,
whatever chronic issue they had, that's all they talked about. They had no other life. They had no other interests. For whatever reason, this is the thing that it was all they talked about. And so much so that it became their identity. And if you took that sickness away, what would they be left with? An unfulfilled life, bad relationships with their children, bad relationships with their spouse.
Do you ever wonder what suicide is?
Unfortunately, a lot.
Yeah, we've had to, because we faced it.
Yeah.
If you really take a look at suicide and you say, when a person's identity is now lost,
yeah,
rather than continue to suffer, they will end their life.
Let's see if I can. Yeah, okay. Let's see if that works. There we go. Back in action.
And so if you look at this is the creature's ultimate attempt to survive by killing themselves, because their identity has fallen away, and now they're hopelessly lost.
Well,
that is an explanation for it, but there's a lot more to it than that. But
I think so too. I have a lot, unfortunately. I wish I had. I wish you and I had not experienced that so frequently.
Yeah.
But I mean, that unfortunately, suicide is well on the rise. And I think there is a sense of real hopelessness and lack of identity and lack of purpose that comes with that. Because ultimately, suffering with meaning, we can do. If our suffering means something, we can get through anything. As a human being, you can get through anything if there is a reason to do it. When there is no purpose, and right now we are facing a lack of purpose epidemic. People do not know why they're here. They don't know what they're doing. If your existence doesn't mean anything, and it's just the suffering you see around you, it's hard to live with that. And I think that if there was one intervention that I could make with the world, and that is to figure out what your purpose is, and everybody who comes to me asks that question. It's the one question they want to know more than anything else.
Anyone who talks to me is going to get that.
Yeah.
There's no other conversation more worthy than what are you here to experience?
Right. And what are you here to express also?
Well, it's the thing of whatever I'm going to do, it's to benefit me.
Yeah.
And I also want it to benefit the people around me.
Right.
It has to meet both criteria for me to engage in it.
It does.
And if you're really feeling like you're alone, that no one cares about you, that life is empty and meaningless,
yeah, that's a rough road.
It's an impossible road.
Yeah.
What's the number of how many people die from fentanyl poisoning? Is it 100,000 a year?
I think it's like either the number one or number two cause of death of young people in my age bracket and younger. Yeah.
So I this number 100,000.
It might be more than that now.
Well, you're going, how is this possible?
I understand how it's possible because honestly, I've felt purposeless before. I've absolutely felt like I couldn't figure, not that I had no purpose, but I couldn't figure out what it was. And whatever it was, I wasn't making an impact anyway. So it didn't really matter. I felt that before. Absolutely. I certainly don't feel it now, but I have felt it.
I've felt it too.
And I've felt the helplessness of it. Absolutely. And it drains the color out of life. It drains the possibility of joy out of life. For whatever reason, we all come here with an understanding that we have a purpose in being here. And it's been interesting watching because, we have the Marvel movies, we have the superhero stuff. We have, we grew up with movies. You grow up with movies and books. There's the sense that your purpose has to be giant, right? You have to save the world
so
single-handedly. Okay.
It's small wonder those movies are so popular.
Because everyone is searching for purpose. But the problem is that if you think you're going to save the world single-handedly, you're not going to. Nobody has saved the world single-handedly. The world has gone through, we see this through history. The world has gone through so many ups and downs, and even the greatest leaders in history, many of them, we don't remember their names. We don't remember what they did. It's a tapestry that's woven together by all of humanity, all of life, quite frankly. But it's a tapestry that's woven together, and you have your thread in that tapestry.
Yes.
And the real point is to figure out what your thread in the tapestry is, save the whole tapestry.
It starts with questioning that, and what am I doing here?
Yeah.
Do I have a purpose? Well, you can have one.
Right.
And then what really fits who you are and what you want to experience and what you want to share.
Yeah.
It doesn't happen in a vacuum. You've got to be involved with people who are on the same journey.
I agree with that.
Not alcohol, drugs, and being stupid. That, as far as I'm concerned, that has no place in America, in human society.
Yeah.
That's where most people go because they have no one to talk to.
Yeah.
You and I have talked about this maybe 100 times about the big study from one of the major universities' social psychology departments was, what does it take for a person's life to turn out?
Yeah.
Now, turn out means a lot of different things, but let's just say it generically, turn out.
Yeah.
If they have one person to talk to that cares about them and will listen to them.
Yeah.
Going, is that all it takes? Going, the answer is yes. And what does it mean in terms of that's rare?
Well, we don't have a society of listeners, right? We have a society that wants to scream at each other. right versus left, X versus Y, this group of people versus this group of people, both screaming at each other that they're the right ones without listening to the other side. And it's very rare. We have such a the Western world overall is so divided because nobody's listening to each other, right? No one's listening.
If you've never been listened to, how are you supposed to know how to listen to somebody else?
How are you supposed to even know it's a category of thing that you're supposed to be doing?
Exactly.
But
And the point
here's
is,
how. How is because you want to be listened to, right? The both sides that are screaming, what do they ultimately want? They want to be listened to. So if you want to be listened to, does the other side want to be listened to? Yes. That's how you know.
I agree with you. And because of the business I've been in for the last 55 years, it's always, how do you accomplish that? What are the details in terms of making that happen? So anyone who's listening to this, what we want to give them is, what's the next step?
Yeah.
Because how many of us don't have this? Well, some of us have
people, most people,
the vast majority of people
don't. Yeah.
And what's that thing about most people live lives of quiet desperation and die with their song unsung? Boy, is that a rich theme to follow.
Yeah.
Do you want to be one of those? The answer is no.
Yeah.
Whatever my song is,
I'm going to get it out.
I'm going to get it out. And you have people who will fight actively against you doing it.
Sometimes, yeah.
Only if you let them.
Yeah.
It's like, if they're going to fight against you for that, they're fired.
Yeah.
And I like the term fired because it has particular definitive quality to it.
Yeah.
Not I'm going to let them pass out of my life. No, you fire them.
Yeah.
They're gone.
Well, and that makes it a proactive thing for you too.
It's a power play.
Yeah.
And you're winning.
Yeah.
For yourself.
For yourself. It's
not against them, because
you're
not really hurting them no matter what you do.
Yeah.
But you are saving yourself.
Yeah.
But you got to understand and have that be your mantra. I've got a song to sing.
Mm-hmm.
It's in me already.
Yeah.
I might not know what it is, but it's in there. Now journaling makes sense. Now meditation makes sense. Now conversations with other people about, well, how come you do what you do?
Yeah.
Because you seem to be pretty active in getting this done, what does it do for you?
Mm-hmm.
And if they're telling you enough, they're going to say, it's how I feel inside. Because every darn thing is emotionally driven.
Yep.
No matter what you think, no, I thought my way through it. Oh, that's a bunch of bull.
No. People are not logic driven. It's just not reality.
They go inside where have feelings about it, and the feelings say, okay, do it or don't do it.
Yeah.
Now, is that always accurate? No, it's not always accurate. But if you're paying attention to cause and effect and actually write it down in some way, or talk to other people about it, it becomes part of your awareness.
Yeah.
And when it becomes part of your awareness, it starts to modify how you act. You have information now, perhaps for the first time.
Yeah.
This is all inside that model of who are you, what's trying to happen for you, honor it and go do it.
Yeah.
And I'm not fooling myself. Most people won't take the bait. But the people who will get to have a much better life.
And I think that, at least in my experience, that's happening more and more. Sometimes people have to get to a real point of pain in their lives before they'll make that choice moving forward. I have somebody that I work with who he more or less made the same mistake in relationships over and over and over and over again. It's wild to watch, right? But we all have people in our lives who do that, right? If you have not done it yourself. And until the last time he got dumped out of nowhere, he was unwilling to actually look at what healing would take for him.
Oh.
But it got to a point where it was so painful that he said, I am willing to try whatever it takes. And it is amazing how often things have to get to that point before people are really willing to take the action required to let go of resentments, to let go of old pains, to really start healing processes. and really take them on, because you understand where that road leads. You took that road all the way down to the end and you said, I don't like where this goes. I want to go somewhere else.
And if I don't do something, I'm going to get more of the same.
Exactly. And I cannot take more of the same. And so, ultimately we're watching resentment play out on the global stage, but everybody's got it inside.
Some days I wish I was immune, but I had to go through the same darn
Oh,
process
me too.
as everybody else.
Yeah.
And in certain areas of my life, I had hit absolutely rock bottom.
Yeah.
And I say, wake up.
Absolutely. I had to hit, this is a personal story, but I had to hit rock bottom in terms of relationships before I found my husband. And it took years of work on myself before
Yeah.
I became the person who brought that relationship into my life. And it was interesting because it's not that I hadn't been offered that level of relationship before, but it wasn't what I was looking for at the time. And it took me hitting relationship or rock bottom for me to really do that work on myself and find this like extraordinary partner, this extraordinary man. But it took me hitting rock bottom for that.
People who don't know you don't know how much work you actually
Oh my
did.
God. Yeah, that's true.
The amount of work you did was extraordinary.
Thank you.
Well, I got to watch it and participate in it.
Well,
And to work on myself as well.
Absolutely.
Like my life is my project.
Me too.
And even though I'm not young anymore by a wide margin, my life is my work.
Yeah.
It is my project.
Yeah.
And I'm happy to see the realizations I come to,
Mm-hmm.
the understandings I come to, the cause and effects I'm putting together, and more and more and more what I want more of and what I want less of.
Yeah.
And journaling really does help if I'm paying attention to more of or less of.
Right.
And my journal used to all revolve around how to get something done.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that didn't work very well because it wasn't clear enough about what I wanted less of and what I wanted more of.
Yeah.
So I no longer say how I'm going to get it done. I say, what is it that I want?
Because you don't know. I think it's like a fundamental lie that we were told. And honestly, I credit school a lot to this, because in school there's a path, right? Like, here are the classes, they're set for you. You sit in this desk, you take these tests, and that's how you succeed in life. When you get out into the real world, which all the rest of us are in, life doesn't hand you perfect answers like that. Right? You're never ever given a like, here is the path, and you just do these things and then these things and then these things, and then there you go, you succeed. That is an unrealistic way to set up children for success, because life doesn't work that way. And so the idea that we come out of school with is that there is one path and it is linear. It is this way up. That is not how life works. Life works like this. And interestingly enough, there's a phenomena in nature. If you watch flowers bloom, they don't just bloom out. There's a process where they come in and out, right? There's a contraction and then an expansion, contraction, then an expansion. And so when we hit a contraction phase, we think, oh, we're doing something wrong, we're failing. But it might just be you're contracting before you expand. And we're not taught that. We're not taught the natural process of sometimes there's a contraction before an expansion. Often, if not always, there's a contraction before an expansion. Sometimes it takes years for an expansion. Sometimes you're in contraction for years. But nobody tells you that that's actually a very normal process. So it took me 3 years of being single before I found my husband. And that's the contraction, right? That's the part where I went into myself, I conserved my energy, and I went and healed. And I healed in a bunch of different ways. And I will talk about this. I will praise my experience with ayahuasca till the end of time, probably, because of how much it gave me in terms of healing. And it's not for everybody. It's for people who are, particularly drawn to it. But I was, and you were.
Yes.
But that was deep, deep hard work. That was not easy by any stretch.
I'm convinced because I did it too.
Yes. And anybody who does it will tell you it's not an easy deal. But I went through the fires myself. I went through the fires of my own challenges to be reborn. And I can tell you one of the things that made the most impact to me is the pride that I felt going that deep into the darkness that scared me so much, and being able to come out the other side. All the things that I was so afraid of, ayahuasca made me face them. And to face the things that you're most afraid of and to come out the other end is something that I felt very proud of having done. And there's nothing, I don't know that there's very much that compares to doing that. But it was deeply impactful for me.
Well, since I've been in the field of psychology for so long, there's my experience is there's nothing like it. Nothing even remotely like it.
I wonder about something, actually. It's something I've been thinking about for a while, and that's rite of passage. Because to me, it was almost a rite of passage because it was that hard. I mean, it was hard. If anybody tells you that ayahuasca is not maybe the hardest thing they've ever done in their life, they're not telling you the truth. It is hard. And but there are other things that are very hard too. War is extremely hard. Former military. We've got my husband is former military and David is former military, so we have that as almost a rite of passage that they went through. There are many other versions of rites of passage. A thing that we don't have in the Western world anymore is the rite of passage. Right? Especially, you coming out of school is not a rite of passage. It's not something that brings you really into adulthood, into manhood or womanhood. We don't have that anymore. So because you learn about yourself in a lot of ways, but doing something extremely challenging. And I'm absolutely not comparing my ayahuasca journey to being in war. Okay. Absolutely not. Being in war is horrible in more ways than I can personally imagine. Okay. But no matter what that is for you, I think it's deeply important to go through a rite of passage, something that is extremely challenging. And I think it could be something that, because many people have horrible upbringings or horrible things that happen to them. And instead of letting it take you down, you find a way to grow from it anyway. And I think that in its own right can be a rite of passage, but you cannot stay in it. You have to move through it. The only way out is through. When I've experienced the worst things I've ever experienced, the most horrible and traumatic, I say that to myself. The only way out is through.
That is so good. Technically, that's called perceptual field shift.
Yeah.
And basically what that is you go into the experience as one person, you come out the other side as somebody more
else.
mature.
Yeah.
So there's this big the experience is powerful, and it's so powerful that you open your eyes and you say, I see the world quite differently.
Yeah.
I experience myself as almost a different person. Sometimes you say it, I experience myself as a different person.
Right.
And I think that you're talking about rite of passage.
Yeah.
And I think this whole thing about giving up resentment and owning your life and owning the consequences of everything is a perceptual field shift in the making.
Absolutely.
And now you're talking about real freedom, because you and I are devoted to self-expression. Right. And we want everyone around us to find their self-expression and thrive and really prosper in this life.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's why we're doing this.
Is there enough food for everyone on the planet?
Yes.
Clearly. Is there enough everything that you can think of? Is there enough for everyone on the planet?
Yeah.
I'm so impressed. I kind of hypothetically talked like that. But then when we were doing all these deep dives into what's going on in other places in the world, I saw that the government in China bring 800 million people out of severe poverty into moderate prosperity by design.
Yeah.
And we went and saw it. I mean, it's not like they made it up and we just
Yeah.
saw the comic book. No, we went and saw it firsthand,
Right.
and it was real.
Granted, they had some of their own problems with that, so I'm not,
And
there's plus or
it's
minuses,
a human,
okay?
it's a human endeavor.
Right.
But we saw results of it,
Yeah.
and I was very impressed. Now, granted, did they have lots of problems? Oh,
Sure. There's some ways that they did that I'm not sure about, but yes, they did do that. Unquestionably, they did do that.
and so it really told me there is enough of the. We as human beings have the resources to give everyone that kind of experience.
Yeah.
And you and I've talked about this in the past. In 1975, because I was very active in social psychology, and education,
Mm-hmm.
and I was part of an education team that was doing remarkable stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Individual programs for individual kids.
Yeah.
I mean,
That's
what?
cool. That's really cool.
And the kids were thriving.
Of course they were. Of course they were.
Went away, of course.
Wow, what a surprise.
But the common conversation was, in 1975, we already know enough about how to do everything
Right.
to give all human beings a life that they can thrive in.
Mm-hmm.
Now, and the real question was, how do we get enough resolve from enough people to make a difference, as opposed to have it regress back to fit
Yeah.
you're a square peg, let's jam you into a round hole and
Yeah.
do the best you can, where people do not thrive. And right now we have a world where people are not thriving.
Absolutely. Well, and I think that's ultimately the question, right? Is if this knowledge is out there, which it is, why are we not living that way? And even when it comes down to the argument, I think the argument at this point, because for a long time the argument was, well, there's no money for it. There's no money for it. There's no money for it. There's money to fight endless wars. So there's money to fix the school system. Okay. What there isn't is, if you lived a life of purpose, would you go work for $8, $9,
$17,
even $17, right? At a fast food place.
No,
right?
You wouldn't.
No, you wouldn't. Would you go and sit in a cubicle for 8 hours a day, doing mindless tasks? No, you wouldn't. You wouldn't do it. And so the way that the rat race works is, if you are self-expressed, you don't want to go do those types of jobs.
Matter of fact, you won't go do them.
And during COVID, it's interesting because a lot of people brought up this exact topic, and a lot of people made fun of millennials and Gen Zers for this, because they were like, we don't want to spend our lives doing this. And the older generations kept saying, well, but you have to. Why? Why do you have to? And it's because it's interesting. I watched a TikTok or something. It wasn't TikTok. I think it was like something Instagram maybe. And it was a video of this guy talking about the fact that his father worked for the same company. I think he's like 45 or so, and so his father had worked for the same company for 30 years. And what they gave him was a watch, right? They gave him like a nice gold watch on his retirement, on his 30 years of working there. Okay. And then his mother had to sell the watch to pay for his funeral costs because they had cut his pension. Right? So this man had given his entire life to this company who didn't care about him. And when it was time for him to actually rest and enjoy his life, the safety and comfort that they had promised him, they just cut it. And they probably didn't care, because the people who cut it probably didn't know he existed.
Exactly.
Right? They don't know. And so giving your life to that, the generations underneath are having a very hard time saying, oh, well, I'd like to give my life to a company
Who doesn't care about
Who
me?
doesn't care? And it's not wrong. They don't care. And so
You cannot give up personal responsibility.
right.
The company's not going to love you and take care of you and make you part of their family. Boy, is that a red flag when a company says you're part of the family. You're not part of the family. You're an employee.
I'm not even sure people say that much anymore. Like that's really people know you're not. It's not a family. It's a company, and they've watched generations of people more or less be nixed if they don't if they don't need them anymore, or if they're too expensive, they'll just cut them. So you're absolutely right, personal responsibility, but that's the other side of resentment is personal responsibility. And not because someone didn't do you wrong, because they probably did. The point is, if you sit in resentment, that's all you're going to get is more of that same thing, whether it's from your own mind or whether it's from the external world. The only way that stops is personal responsibility.
Boy, you talk about a tough way to go.
Oh my God. Yeah.
I've had these awakenings lately,
Yeah.
which is kind of surprising to me, but
Really?
okay, it is what it is. Well, I'm not done yet.
You are not. You are not done yet. You got a lot left.
So I've had these superstitions that I've built up about, well, the future's really already cast, and I have someone looking out for me and going. And then I could create some examples of it.
Yeah.
2 examples where I was pulled out of death.
Okay.
And it really was pulled out of death.
When?
I'll tell you. Well,
Okay.
Certainly before you were born.
Okay.
So I was traveling across the country, and it was late at night.
Yeah.
And I said, "Okay, I'm tired. I need to get off the road."
Yeah.
So I pulled off into this little town, and I was driving in this really dark street.
Yeah.
And I heard this woo sound. And a voice in my head screamed, "Stop." A train about 60 miles an hour.
Oh,
I missed it
no.
by this far.
Oh my God.
And I said, "Who saved me?"
Yeah.
Well, what I had thought, well, something from the outside did, as opposed to, I like it better when I think of a part of me intuitively understood what was happening and screamed at the rest of me to stop.
Yeah.
I slammed on the brakes this far.
Wow.
I wouldn't be here.
I'm very grateful that you're here.
I have other examples of that where I was saved from drowning by a voice that said, "You don't know anything about surfing, but here's what a surfboard looks like. Try surfing across this really dangerous part of water that you're just about to drown in."
Yeah.
When I got to shore, I couldn't move for 45 minutes.
Wow.
I was so exhausted from struggling in the water.
Yeah.
Going, my brain did that.
Yeah.
I don't want to give that to somebody else. I want to claim credit for it, no matter what the truth is.
Right.
Because the truth is so hard to find.
Yeah, the truth is we don't know.
But I want to exclude as much mythology from my life as possible. Bad things just happen to me. No. And honestly, that's why I brought up earlier 2 things. The first is the voice of the intuition. I don't know what that voice is. Yeah.
I don't know that anybody knows what that voice is, but whatever it is, it told you to stop before you get smushed by a train, and it told you not to drown.
Yeah.
Whatever that intuitive voice is, and it's told me countless things. Whatever that intuitive voice is, you got to listen to it. So you got to figure out which voice it is so that you can hear it and listen to it. It will steer you right. The other thing is, actually, what were you saying? I just lost my train of thought, like mid-thought.
Okay. Well, let's go back to personal responsibility and how you get it. It really comes back to you must go to what I want more of and what I want less of with awareness. Because you need it to guide your life if you're going to own your life.
Yeah.
And the second thing is you're not a leaf floating down a stream.
Yeah, that's the point.
You might be a leaf, but you've got a rudder. You can steer it. Now, life occurs as if we're going downstream.
Yeah,
So having a rudder is really the important thing here, so you can be guiding your own life.
absolutely.
And if you have this awareness, first of all, you have to say, I'm responsible. I can make it happen.
Yeah,
Then you have to say what I want more of and what I want less of, so you can guide where you're going.
yeah,
And if you do that often enough, it becomes an automatic moment by moment event.
yeah.
Do I want more of it or less of it? I know I'm a broken record with that, but I've impacted so many people's lives. And when I see them again, they say, I'm still using.
Yep. Yep.
Do I want
It
more of it or
really
less?
works. It really works.
It really does work.
I want to add this question also to do I want more of and do I want less of? And that question is, what would I do if I wasn't scared or if I wasn't afraid?
Oh, that's a good question.
Because sometimes when you ask yourself, do you want more of something or less of something, there's a sense of comfort that might creep in, right? And it's not always like, very often I want more of and less of is like a really amazing rudder. So just to sort of top it off with a cherry is, what would I do if I wasn't afraid? Because when people, fear makes me really upset. This is a soapbox for me, but fear has been what's been used to control our collective populations.
Yes.
Hands down, whether it is a constant fear of another war, whether it's a constant fear of a disease, whether
Or
it's a constant
criticism
fear,
or whatever
oh
it
my God,
is.
whatever it is constant fear. Okay. And it's in all of our media. It's in all of the movies and TV shows that we watch. One of the things I actually think about that's very interesting is the fact that you as a kid were told to hide under the desk if there was a nuclear bomb.
You think about it now and just laugh out loud.
What good is hiding under a desk gonna do if there's a nuclear blast? What's gonna, like, for some fraction of a second you're gonna not be vaporized? What? That's insanity. But you, as a little kid, were living in fear, hiding under your desk like that was going to do something. That insanity. Okay. So the fear
Right.
campaign's been going on a long time. Not that they're not legitimate reasons to be afraid in life, because there are things to be scared of. However,
That guides you away from them.
Right. But a little kid who's got an iPhone and is living in the big cities somewhere, or living in the mountains somewhere, just watched somebody got eaten by a crocodile, and they've never seen a crocodile in their entire life and probably never will. Right? That's not a realistic thing for them, but it's like fear nonstop. Social media is full of it. TV
The movies
shows,
are certainly full of it.
videos, everything's full of fear, right? You should be scared of these 10 million things. This planet is dangerous. It
eventually does kill you no matter what.
And we have 100% death rate here in the world. Okay, everyone dies. And nobody wants to die early. Okay,
yeah.
So I'm saying, like, obviously protect yourself. Do the right things. Do the smart things, for God's sakes. Okay, do the smart right things to protect yourself. However, being afraid all of the time is a terrible way to live.
Well, it stops you from living your dream. It
Right.
stops you from even having a dream.
Right. It stops you from allowing yourself to have the dreams to even probably begin with. And mostly what we have to be afraid of right now is social ostracization or cancel culture, or somebody might say something bad about you. Well, somebody's probably saying something bad about you anyway now.
It's almost guaranteed, if you're alive, someone's going to say something. The worst thing is to be so ignored that no one says anything bad about you.
Well, yeah,
there's that.
So ultimately, I think that what would you do if you were not afraid is a really nice cherry on that, because most of the things that people want to do are not things that they genuinely need to be afraid of. Let
me give you a slightly different frame on that.
Sure.
What would I do if I was a person of courage?
I like that, but I don't know. So courage, because courage definitely is moving past your fear anyway. But there's also a sense that most of the things that we're afraid of do not genuinely merit the fear that we have of them. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, we're
And
actually agreeing.
we are. But what I want to be clear of with it is that, so there's they did a study on worrying, right? And so it's like something like 98% of the things that we worry about never happen.
Right.
And of that 2% that do happen, it's like 96% of that isn't as bad as we think it's going to be. So some very small fraction of what we worry about is actually what we should be worried about. And a lot of times we're not even worried about the things we should be worried about, right? And so I just want to take some of that power out of the things we're told to be afraid of. Right? Because it's
I get where you're going with that.
yeah. Does that make sense?
It makes sense. And of course, being who I am, I say, well, how do we do that? And that's why I come up with,
Yeah.
if I was a person of courage, that means you have to imagine something.
Yeah.
And
That makes sense.
And you go, well, let me step into that. Now that I've imagined it
Yeah.
sometimes for the very first time, what would I be doing if I was that?
Yeah.
So a creative process has just taken place that
Mhm.
might actually step you out of it.
Right.
Maybe. I mean, it's all a big experiment anyway.
That's true. And to figure out what works for you personally, because what works for us or what works for the people we work with or for one person or for another, it's different. Everyone requires something different because everyone's journey is objectively unique.
It's theirs.
Absolutely.
Just as yours, mine is mine.
Yep. So we're giving things to assess whether that's good for you, whether that's right for you. Okay, let's take a couple of questions because my voice is giving out. I've been talking for 3 hours straight.
Okay.
More than that. I think it's like 3.5 hours. Okay. Arm me with harmony. Hey, it's good to see you. I hope your dog is doing okay. We send your dog our love. Is an example of radical responsibility realizing that I played a role by cutting the rose bloom of the plant and I got stung by the bee. Is that a good example of radical responsibility? Yeah.
Were you there?
Right.
Was the bee visible? Whether it was or wasn't, you were in the situation.
Mhm.
And the power position is, I am responsible for it.
Yeah.
Otherwise, what would you do instead? Be
Otherwise,
weakened by the circumstance?
right.
So that's a good example of radical responsibility. I own every piece of that. And by the way, when I cut roses, I'm going to be a lot more careful from now on
Right.
about where the bees are, because that bee sting taught me a important lesson about how it hurts.
Right. Or wear gloves or whatever
Where,
that
you know,
is.
you're going to take care of yourself in a much better way because you know there's a consequence.
Right.
And it falls on you to take care of you.
Right. And if you, so yes, absolutely. That's absolutely. And sometimes people say, well, all I was there. Well, you were there. That was that you can do something if you're responsible for something. You can do something about it. If you are a victim of something, there's nothing you can do. And which would you rather have, the option to do something or not? And not saying that victimization isn't real. It is. People do horrible things to each other.
Yeah.
But you have to have some control or part of your own life, because control is not a good word for that.
Well, it's like something bad happens and you say, I don't want it to happen again.
Yeah.
That's the power play.
Right.
Because the bad thing happened.
It did.
And if you say, okay, I am taking control of this so it doesn't happen again, that's what you do.
Yeah.
Next
Absolutely.
question.
Okay. Do you think humans, so it's Arm Me with Harmony. Do you think humans need a common enemy to find purpose in life?
No.
I don't either. Yeah, I don't either.
You don't need enemies at all.
Mhm.
You need allies to help you realize what you want to experience and go experience it.
Yeah.
I mean, how big of a lesson do we need about how complicated something is to get done? You need resources.
Yeah.
You need other people. You need people to encourage you. At least I do.
Yeah.
And that's how I've gotten a bunch of things done in life, by the allies. And I've done some really cool things.
Yeah.
And I've never identified it as an enemy I've needed to overcome. It's what do I want to experience and how do I get there? And who I need to take on the journey with me.
So I think that a very interesting, because there's a sense that, especially in the Western world, but we're coming out of a dark age, right? We're coming out of the dark ages. I laughed at this because somebody once said they're not called the dark ages because it was dark outside, right? It's called the dark ages because over the course of the last 1,000 years, it's been nonstop war and death and disease. I mean, it's horrible stuff. Okay. Like if we look at our history books, it's not full of peace.
Right.
Okay. So there's sense that that you do have to have, like, it's my purpose is to protect us from these bad people. Okay. It's what people use as propaganda for wars, right? These are the bad people. We have to go get them. Bad. Okay. Enemy. I think that it's not necessary for a couple of reasons. First of all, we humans are not on this planet for very long.
Right.
If you are super lucky, you get 100 years here. We come not really knowing who we are, where we came from. We don't know anything.
Right.
Okay.
We actually know nothing. I agree with that
Right.
completely.
We know almost nothing. And so we have an opportunity to learn about ourselves here while we're here on this planet. We have an opportunity to learn about what we can create together, what we can create individually. And so I find that people's self-expression in many cases is actually creative. Some people are born protectors, and even in that case, it's interesting to watch them create, to step into the role of the creator. Uh, you know, people can create many things. They can
Clearly.
create human life, and there's enough built into this that we can learn from pain in other ways. Because my experience, my take from many of the things that I study under a Tao master right now. And then many of the other things that I have been brought into in other ways, in the spiritual sense, talk about this place being a school, which makes a lot more sense.
Well, it's useful to think that.
It is useful in the sense that if it's a school, a lot more of this makes sense. Because if you look at how challenging things are for there to just be, one all loving, dude in the sky, which
Yeah.
if that's what you believe, I honor that completely. But it makes more sense to me personally if this is a school, because you can learn about yourself through pain. You can learn about yourself through grief. You can learn about yourself through loss,
through experimentation,
for
trying things that work, trying things that don't work. Yes.
You can learn about who you are. You can learn about yourself, and you can grow.
Yeah.
But it seems to me that humanity has sort of been stuck in the learning that comes through pain, and forgetting that there's actually the other side of creativity and happiness and love and togetherness and peace that humanity doesn't seem to know much about right now. And I think very much that just how there is learning in pain and suffering, there is also massive learning that can occur in being in a happy, stable, peaceful, creative space. In fact, children learn better through play than they do through sitting in a classroom, having their hands, swapped with rulers. We learn more through play and exploration. And when you're playing, you don't have an enemy. When you're playing, you're playing. And so I don't think that an enemy is required, but I do think that a goal is required.
I agree.
And a goal,
You have to be going for
you
something.
have to be going for something.
So, and the question is, am I getting closer or farther away from the
Yeah.
accomplishment? And that's where the analysis is. That's where the feedback from other people is, on and on.
Yeah.
But it's, am I getting closer or am I getting further away
Yeah, from that goal.
from the goal?
You see people who are, masterful at musical instruments. I love watching pianists, because a pianist just has this extraordinary ability to create emotion out of sound. Like if you hear a really good pianist,
Yeah.
it's just this extraordinary experience. There's no enemy there.
Right.
That person learned to play the piano to create something, even if that creation is just the expression of emotions that he felt or she felt.
Right.
So there are many different ways to learn and grow, and I am very enthusiastic for humanity to figure out what some of those other ways are. Other than the pain that's been during the dark ages of the last 1,000 years or so.
And have it be the norm rather than the exception.
Yeah, the world is so extraordinary. And we were talking about this right before the show, that how many people go spend time outside every day?
Almost none.
Oh, people don't go outside of their house. And so the exploration that can come and the growth that can come from going out and being in nature, climbing a mountain. And in a sense, that can be your enemy, right? Like climbing, like the mountain can be your enemy. But that's not destroying anything. That's conquering something that you felt that you couldn't do or you couldn't be. And so in a sense, it might be an interesting take to say that there are the enemies inside of you saying that you can't do something, and to go and conquer those might truly be a self-expression.
That's where to go. It's all, there's this thing about comparing yourself to other people, other comparison, waste of time. The journey is about you facing up to who you are.
Right.
And are you getting closer or further away from goals and dreams fulfilled?
Well,
first of all, you got to have them. Let's go to the next question.
Well, we're well over.
Yeah, we're well.
And my voice is giving out after talking for 3 hours. So thank you guys so much for joining us. And we will see you next time. Bye for now.
Bye now.